Hello everyone, we're going to start now. Hello, welcome to the big room, what we're calling the big room. We're going to get started. This section is connecting the dots, improving user experience through continuous feedback and action. My name is Eiseman. I'm the head of technology services at the Yale Law School Library. And our panelists are going to introduce themselves as well in just a few moments. I'm going to start off by telling two stories. This story you'll hear a lot if you hear me present. It's kind of an academic folk tale. A lot of different disciplines tell it differently depending on what they're trying to illustrate, and everyone kind of adds their own spin to it. This is how I tell it. Imagine an office building in New York City. Think Madden. And all the tenants are complaining that the elevators are too slow. They have to wait too long to get their elevators. So the building manager brings in a team of consultants to try and figure out how to fix the problem. And the consultants look at putting in new elevator banks, but that's not feasible. So they look at the latest, greatest elevator technology, but that's too expensive. So they try to schedule express elevators and local elevators, but the complaints just keep coming. And mathematicians will use this story to illustrate that math can't solve every problem. Finally, one of the consultants decides to just take a seat in the lobby and watch as people wait for the elevators to come. And after watching for just a morning, says, here's what you do, put up mirrors next to the elevator doors. And the complaints stop. The mirrors give people something to do while they're waiting for the elevators. Fix their hair, their tie, people flirt through the mirrors, all these kinds of things. And nobody complains about how slow the elevators are anymore. More recently, and this is actually a true story, the Houston International Airport was having trouble. Their number one complaint was how long people had to wait for their bags to come to the bag carousel. And through a similar process, they actually tried to institute new technology. They hired more people to get the bags to the carousels more quickly. But what solved the problem was putting the planes further away from the actual baggage carousel so that people had to walk longer to get to the carousels and didn't have to wait as long. And these stories illustrate to me, besides the fact that we tend to jump to techno-solutionism to try and solve every problem, that the most important part of solving these problems, implementing new products and services and things like that, is to do user research, to think about user experience, to learn what their problems are, and to try and solve those problems. And that's why we decided to do this program as something larger than just usability, but user research and continuous feedback and action. I'd like to recommend a book called Just Enough Research, which is a publication from the A Book Apart series. And in this book, one of their recommendations, he breaks up the types of user research you can do into different types, purposes, and goals. And here's the general way that he does it. First, there's generative or exploratory research. So this is research when you're trying to get new ideas, you're trying to figure out who else is having these problems, you want to implement something new, you want to see what other people are doing. That's this type of research. It might include literature review, it might be interviews with your users, focus groups, things like that. Then there's descriptive or explanatory research. And this is where you kind of put the problem in context. You try to define the problem really well. Figure out how you can solve it. What are the best ways to approach it? Evaluative research. So this is what we think of commonly as like usability research. We have some solutions, we think they're solutions, and we want to test them out. Do they work? Do they solve the problem? Do they address this need? Do they address this issue? And that's evaluative research. and causal research, which might be similar to like troubleshooting. Something's happening, you want to figure out why it's happening. And as our panelists speak today, I'd like to just try and, there is no one technique that can be used across all of these. Some of these techniques can kind of fit in the different types of research that you're doing, the different types of things you're trying to accomplish. And as we listen to our panelists, I think it would be helpful to kind of think about how these different techniques fit into this research process.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Jason. Hi, I'm Jefferson. I'm a reference librarian at Yale Law. And I also work on web content and user experience. So I'm going to talk about the basics, the stuff that probably if you're in an intermediate session, you might know a little bit about, so the basics of user experience. Everybody sees things just a little differently. You and your organization can spend tons of time envisioning what your users want, whether it's from a website or whether it's from services. But if they don't like it, if they don't understand it, if they can't interact with it, or if they just don't plain need it, all that time, all that effort, that energy, that money, that's going to be wasted. And so I'm going to talk about the two most basic types of user experience, data gathering, which is analytics, and usability. And I'm going to talk about that in the framework of something that Jason and I did about right when I first started 18 months ago, which was redesign the Yale Law Library website. So last year we migrated from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, and we decided to participate in the university-wide Yale site. It was like an out-of-the-box Drupal instance. It involved templates, colors, themes. It meant that there was not a lot of back-end coding that we had to do. It was really nice, and we would sort of be thematic with the rest of the university. We would have support, because Jason and I make up 100% of our web team. So it'd be nice to have a little extra support. So our basic information gathering mechanisms, like I said, were analytics and usability testing. We run Google Analytics, and we're primarily concerned with a few things that look good when we do our annual report, with clicks and bounce rate, unique page views, that kind of thing. We also, at the time, were running Crazy Egg, which is a heat map, so we could see where on different pages people were interested in, what they were clicking on. We also ran, I don't know if we still do, Hootsuite, which is the social media hub. It has its own built-in analytics. We're not super concerned with social media for various reasons. So it's not something that I'm particularly adept at talking about, but that's yet another analytical layer. We also did usability. We did card sorting through a library advisory council, and Deborah's going to talk a little bit more about that. So that we could kind of get an idea for information architecture. We did individual testing. We talked to our librarians, because they are our primary users of our website. Even though we'd like it to be our students and faculty, librarians use your library website more than anyone else. And like I said, we had library advisory council just sort of talking to them about what they were hoping to see. So the analytics tells us sort of who and what in sort of hard data. Our analytics told us that we get thousands of unique page visits, sometimes upwards of 10,000 unique page visits to our website each month, whether it was the old website or this new one. We also know that our bounce rate is high, ranging at about between 62 and 65%. In marketing, that would be a cause for alarm. However, in libraries, a high bounce rate is good. It means that people are finding what they need and going to that instead of hanging around still searching. We also gather data about what people are looking at on our website, what research guides, or what's the most popular thing on our webpage. And all of these measurements give us numbers, sort of sketched out a basic idea for how many people use us, how often, and what they do, but they didn't really tell us anything about what they wanted. And they didn't tell us how they interacted with the website. So usability testing shows us how our users actually interacted. And what we did was we bribed students to come and sit down for 20 minutes at a time and tell us about their experience. With the library advisory councils, they were already getting free lunch, and they like to tell us what they want and don't want anyways. So it was just a way for us to ask questions, which was really nice. So while analytics ran quietly in the background, gathering data, usability gave us, sort of an active process. And we tested how our users found materials and people in databases, and basically just sort of how they went through the website, how they searched through the website. But we weren't just interested in how they found things, how they navigated. We also asked questions about their experiences. We really wanted to know what they liked and what they didn't like. So, if those web pages could talk, what would they say? Analytics told us that the average amount of time they spent on our website was about 2 to 3 minutes. And we averaged about a 65% bounce rate, which is, like I said, isn't a big deal. And we got as many as 12,000 unique visitors at a time. From usability testing, we learned that they wanted it to look more like Google. Said every web user of this generation ever, right? And they wanted it to be cleaner. They wanted it to have more white space, less menus. They wanted to be able to search for what they wanted to find and not have us tell them what they needed to know. Which is kind of against my librarian brain, but. So we went from this, which there's nothing inherently wrong with this. What you don't see is that all of the menus are drop-down menus, and there was a very large footer that contained pretty much a whole map of the information architecture of the website. And now our website looks like this. So what they wanted was the hours to be more prominent. They wanted today's hours right there. It's not that they weren't prominent before, it just wasn't where their eye was catching. We built a section that prominently displayed the most used pages. The Borrow Direct, Interlibrary Loan, Research Help, F&I, some of the most used pages. We use this rotating feature over here on the left-hand side to market library services and information. And it's more important now because we've gotten rid of a lot of those drop-down menus and that very transparent information architecture. We've renamed and expanded the header menu, and again, there's no more drop-down menus. And we placed as much as we can above the folder at the top of the website so that they don't have to scroll down. Studies suggest that about 80% of what a web user looks at is above the fold. They really won't go much further than that. They also spend a lot of time looking at the left side. So using sort of the design rule of 7, we've top loaded the important things and kept the other important things on the left-hand side. Also, and this is something that has nothing to do with analytics. Our analytics doesn't support this, but we decided that it was really important for us to be mobile responsive. Something happened in the Yale sites, the Drupal instance on the Yale sites, and we're not currently, but we have been for a very long time. Only about 10% of our users come to us through mobile, through phones or tablets. But if you look at our reading room, you look at our students, there's a phone in one hand, a laptop in front of them, and a tablet in the other hand. We want to meet them where they are before they even know they need us to be there. So, what does it all mean? For this sort of basic level, and throughout, it's all about balance. Balance between what the user wants, what the analytics tell us, what the librarians want, and sort of our librarian instinct to try to teach and provide. It's a balance between improvement and constant change. We're also hoping to kind of move past the whole website into, if you think of usability and analytics, you think of it from a web-based perspective. We actually just kind of want to know what our library users want from our library in person, in the space, in the staff. So we're moving towards doing usability and kind of researching how they use our library outside of how they use our digital footprint. We just want to know more about what we want to know more about our users. We want to know what they want and how the library can anticipate and be responsive to their needs. Next up is Deborah Schander.
Hello, I'm Deborah Schander. I'm the coordinator of digital projects and outreach. My title just changed. It's the first time I've actually had to say it in public. That's my title. I'm at Georgia State. And I'm going to follow up on what Jordan was saying. She talked to you a lot about sort of what are known as the traditional user experience data gathering methods, things like usability testing, website analytics, and at the end she brought up she wanted to find out more about the user experience, what they wanted from the library as a space, in the physical space as opposed to just their digital space. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Now, those sorts of traditional data gathering methods are really great ways to gather lots of data, large amounts of data from your users as a whole. But there are times when, I realize, hey, look, that's my first slide. There are times when you do that they tend to actually anonymize your users. You tend to focus more on the data that you're gathering than maybe on the people who are giving you that information. So rather than just saying, okay, we know that our students want this, our faculty want this as a large group, you want to also be able to make the voice stand out from the crowd. What do the individuals that you're talking to say? Can you think of them as individuals and not just one large homogeneous group? So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. At Georgia State, one of the ways that we've done that is we created a library advisory council. And Jordan mentioned that they have that at Yale. I know there are a number of them at other schools as well. And we found this a very successful way to talk to our students and get feedback from them in ways that make us feel like we're actually getting to know our students and hearing those individual voices and not just looking at the data sets as data. So the way that our advisory council works is we have 12 members. We have 3 students from each of the classes, and we also have a very robust part-time program, so we wanted to make sure they had representatives who were sort of specific to that as well. So we have 3 members from our part-time program, 2. And we meet 4 times a year, so twice a semester we provide them lunch because that's one of the ways to get them to come to these things. And we have changed the way that we select our users over time. We've had it for 3 years now. The first year we actually hand-picked students. We sort of looked around the library and we said, okay, people seem to be paying attention to that person. This person seems to be in the library a lot. I have never seen that person in the library. Can we bring all of these people together? So that's what we did the first year, and it was a great way to get started. We have changed it since then. The second year, we had our legal research instructors sort of pick some names from the class, and then they were presented to the rest of the advisory council, and they selected from those names who the new members were going to be. The way that we've done it this last year, and I think the way that we're going to continue doing it, is we've had that sort of initial selection by the instructors, and then it was put on the SBA election in the fall, so the student body as a whole voted on the student representatives. And so we want people to know how they can find out, how they can give information to the advisory council. We have information about them on our website. We have their names. We got permission from them to do that. We have digital signage that lets people know, a week or 2 in advance, there's a meeting coming up. If you have anything you want to say about the library, let your advisory council members know. We send out monthly emails through a personal librarian program. We remind people of meetings through that. And then we also just rely on word of mouth from the advisory council members themselves. Remind people, hey, if you want to talk to me, let me know, and I'll bring it to the advisory council. So we found it a very successful way to bring a small group of people together who can speak as representatives for our student body. And part of the reason that we wanted to do this is, if you're dealing with maybe faculty or some of the other small groups in a law school, you can't actually go and talk to every single one of them. But if you're dealing with students or alumni, that would just be an unrealistic thing to do. So you want to be able to bring people who can speak for others and give you information. So we tend to gather a lot of different types of data from them. We haven't done a whole lot of website information, but that would be a great way to use them. Some of the ways that we've done it is we focused on the library as space. Based on what our students have said, we added a hot water heater, which you think we had saved the world by doing that. If people are like, I love the water cooler, that's amazing. They love the water cooler. So we've added something like that. We instituted a quiet area in our library for people who wanted that. We have 2 levels. We don't even have 2 floors. We just have 2 levels in our library. So we wanted a place for somebody who could have a quiet area. We also asked them about things like program ideas. We do a table time event in the spring, and we asked them for topics. So this last year, based on their feedback, we did a program entirely about Georgia research, because most of our students practice in Georgia once they've graduated. So we were able to give them something that was specifically focused on what their needs were. We also do, things like Library Week, events that we can do for that. We had a Mario Kart tournament one year because the students really wanted a Mario Kart tournament. We have a minority group that really wants a chess tournament. So that's the kind of thing that you probably wouldn't get in an annual survey, or just saying, oh hey, I sent you an email, just let me know if there's anything that you're interested in. But if you give students a chance to come in front of you and speak, they may be more willing to come and talk. So we had our ABA self-study for our accreditation visit recently. They provided the student voices for that report. We don't have room for stress animals, and so we added pictures of animals to our digital sign, which is, I think, our second most popular thing we've ever done. So we used them for a lot of big projects and a lot of little feedback as well. And we found them a very responsive group to deal with, to give us information about the library. Okay, so why is gathering data like this a good idea? One of the ways is because it gives you direct two-way communication with your target audience. Rather than saying, hey, can you fill out a survey? Can you, let's go look at the analytics of what's on the website. You actually can communicate with the people that you're trying to reach directly. One of the other advantages of this is you're actually creating representatives within your target audience who can speak for you to their peers. And along that same line, the students may not be willing to come and talk to a librarian or an IT member or a faculty member about what you have questions about, but they might be willing to go to a peer and tell them. They might be willing to be more honest in their feedback. So we found that a valuable way to sort of create a little bit of a buffer so that people can be more honest in what they tell us. It can help you focus on maybe some of the more major concerns as opposed to every single, I will stop that at some point, maybe the smaller ones. If you get a survey and it says, okay, we have 57 ideas for suggestions on how we can improve this thing, how do you figure out which one is really, is it one person who's saying each of these, or you have multiple ways? So it can give you a way to focus on, okay, we've had this meeting 3 times this year and this has come up every single time. Yes, it seems to be a continuing, ongoing issue, and we should address that. So it's just another way that you can get benefits. And the other thing is it's a manageable size. If you think about your student body as a population as a whole, that's a lot of people to try and focus on. It's a lot of people to feel like you have to please them. Whereas if you think, okay, we've got 12 people, and if we can make these 12 people happy and feel like they are, being heard, they'll take that back to the rest of your group too. Okay, now, that's not to say that this isn't without perils as well. One of the things that you should be concerned about is having a small group. As with, I remember high school, people may feel excluded. Well, why wasn't I invited to be on the council? Why wasn't I picked? They don't listen to what I have to say. So that's something that you need to be concerned about. If you have a group, especially if you maintain it long term, it may actually become cohesive as itself. Like they may start to just listen to each other. So be aware of the fact that sort of over time your group may be more and more like it's each other as opposed to trying to represent different aspects of your group. You may find that you're hearing the same feedback over and over again, even if you have said that's not something that we can actually even fix. One of the major complaints we get about our current library is we are in the basement with no windows and it's dark and damp. People call it the cave. We can't do anything about that, but that doesn't mean that people don't keep bringing it up. So you may feel like you're just sort of getting a complaint session sometimes. It's difficult to still reach those people who are just not interested in what you're trying to say. One of the when we first formed our committee, we specifically invited people who were not in the library, we had not seen. I remember one of the people we invited just didn't even respond, didn't even bother saying, hey, I acknowledge that you issued this invitation. So there will be people that you just still cannot reach, even if you're trying to do a small group. And it may also be that your representatives are seen as a mouthpiece for the organization. You're becoming part of the institution as opposed to representing us. So those are just some of the things that may happen. They may not. But in terms of ways to combat it, continue to gather large data as well. Let people know you don't have to go through the advisory council or whatever you've instituted to give us your feedback. You can still give us feedback directly. The monthly emails that we can send out, they still say, come and talk to me if you have a question or a concern. So letting people know, just because we have this is just one way that we're gathering information about you and for you. That doesn't mean that you have to be restricted to that. And then also, if you're concerned about things becoming too homogenized, too much repeat feedback, our students are on the advisory council for the duration of law school. Consider doing it, changing it every 6 months or a year, so that more people have a voice and they don't feel like it's just one group going over and over again. So it tends to, it may be different for you depending on what your circumstances are. And you may decide that an advisory council isn't the way to do it. You can have other small groups. You can have multiple small groups. You can have email feedback or a suggestion form. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of gather this representative data as well. So there are valuable reasons for having large information gathering efforts, and there are a lot of valuable reasons for having somebody be a representative for your group as well. And with that, Katie will come up.
All right, so I'm Katie Brown, and I am from Charlotte School of Law, and I am declaring that I love data. Part of the reason why I put that on there for my first slide is that I didn't always love data. When I first started as a reference librarian, I remember Carl Grubin, some of you may know, he was my first director, and he said, when you're at the reference desk, there's a piece of paper, and every time someone comes up and they ask you a question, you have to mark that down because we need to keep track of those numbers. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the dumbest thing ever. One, why are we doing it on paper? But two, I don't care. You know what? I care about answering the question. That's why I went to library school. I want to help people. And then as I moved on from job to job to job, I kind of figured out, wait, this is how we get our money. This is how I have a job. This is how we know what we need to change. This is how we know if a program is working. So now that I am in administration, I love my data. I want as much data and information as I can get. So what I'm actually going to talk about is a little bit more the big picture. What happens when you're in a situation where you should be able to get data, but you're not getting that information that you need. So what do? You know that you need to take this huge chunk of information that you've been provided and do something with it and help your library and provide services, but you realize this really doesn't help the library. So when I went to Charlotte School of Law, one of the things that was really nice is I get there and they say, okay, well, we do these campus-wide surveys. And so some of your schools may do this. I worked at some schools that did this, but then for whatever reason, the library wouldn't get the information, or it was nothing that I could turn around and actually use as a reference librarian or in a management position. But now I go to Charlotte and I'm running the show and I'm like, okay, great. I'm gonna get this amazing information. I'm gonna get this data that's gonna help me out. So we've got our fall student survey that's done. And then we have the LESI. And so for those of you that might not be familiar with the LESI, you kind of have this standard form. It's a 1 to 4 scale. And there are 3 questions that sort of have to do with the library, but it doesn't really help as far as the information that you're going to get. It's like, yeah, it's good raw numbers. You can drop it into a report, but how can I use that information to actually help my student population, to help my faculty, to improve things? Because unless it's a really extreme within that scale, you get to compare yourself to the other schools, that's helpful, but it doesn't really give you a lot back as far as library information. So, I know you can't read this that well, but what actually LESI has done, and Gordon Russell put it together, and actually if you have more questions, Jordan helped with writing the questions for a special LESI question section that you can purchase that has more detailed questions that are specifically for libraries. We do not have this currently at Charlotte, but I have passed this on to our central services, and hopefully we'll get this in the future, so there will be more questions that are library focused, so that that data that we receive from LESI can really push us forward. I will say there is an additional fee for these questions, so that may be some consideration for your schools. You want to let them know or earmark that potentially within your budget. So then everybody said, well, it's okay, because the fall student survey, the LESI is a little bit more general, that's across the country. The fall student survey that we do, we create the questions. So although we have 3 consortia schools, they're all being asked the same questions, you get a lot of valuable information. So with our fall student study, basically the 2 questions that were asked is overall, how satisfied are you with the library? It's like, okay, great. It does break it down by 1L, 2L, and 3L year. It's nice to know that they're satisfied. Or we have how much and in what ways do you use the library? So this is actually a very valuable tool. We pulled some information from this and we're able to make some changes. But then they said, well, it's okay. Go to the comments. That's really where you find out if they like it, if they don't like you. So here's our comment. We had 2 people that said that the library research staff are very helpful. That's all we got. That is the only time in all of the comments that anybody said anything about the library, which is great. They really like the library, these 2 people. And I believe there are both 1Ls too from where they're listed in there. So 2 1Ls really like this. But again, what do I do with this? You know, there are 369 student comments. This is it. So what we decided to do was, and I'm sorry, it's a little grayed out because, you know, they don't necessarily want your dirty laundry of what your students are saying out there in the world. But you get the idea of what they did. They actually went through and they made a spreadsheet. So we were able to see 1Ls, 2Ls, and 3Ls, as well as how many students made comments. And thankfully, our student services, so I didn't actually have to do this, they went through and they chunked everything by topic. So you could see if it was admissions that they had a comment about, or if they had comments about CPD, career placement, or if they had comments about health services, or whatever it was. And so you could break it up by department. But again, the library had that one line. So what we did is we actually took the Excel spreadsheet, and I put a core group together of our core operations team, which is what most people call tech services. We actually call them core operations. And then user experience, which is both my circulation and my reference department. And so we took a few people from that. And if you notice on the side of the chunking, there's a little asterisk. And so we went through the list, line by line, all the comments, and we decided where do we potentially have a role in this comment. So if they were complaining that they didn't know how to get interview information or how to set up to do an informational interview from CPD, we would say, hey, we have a role there. Where does the library fit in? What is our place? So although none of these comments actually had anything to do with the library, we ended up identifying about 20 where we could make a difference. A lot of them were information-based, so what actually came out of that first group is that first group of core, the core team that went through and vetted all of them, they're creating a student survival guide. So it's everything from, you know, how do you find an apartment in Charlotte, or actually they moved downtown, so a lot of the comments were all about parking. So one of the pages is going to be about, like, where's the best place to get parking, where can you get deals, what are the discounts, do they give any discounts at all, where can you know, if there's an event, do you want to park in this area, or is there another lot that you need to go and park at? So we actually have a page that has to do with parking because that was a lot of the comments that were involved. So for that initial group, that is what they pulled out of it. Then what ended up happening was there was a second group that got together and started identifying other places where we could help. And then we are now liaisoning with all of the departments within the law school to say, here are the things that we're doing to address this issue that came up for your comment. So it's one of those things where we're reaching out just simply by asking, what is our role in this? We're the information provider. We're here to help. We're oftentimes the largest group that can help the students beyond the student services department. So what can we do to make a difference? The other thing that we did was we went through the fall student survey and we looked for other data point opportunities. So one of the things that we are going to be doing is actually prepared a practice module. And the students said, these are the areas that we're interested in learning more about. Now, they weren't saying these are the areas that we're learning about, that we're interested in learning more research about, but what we're going to do is actually take these topics and then help, since it's a prepare to practice, teaching them research that's more practical for these particular subtopics, and then sort of gearing them in the right direction to potentially find informational interviews or finding a mentor within that field or things like that. The other thing that we do at our school is when we do decide that we're going to take something like this, like when we went through and actually started vetting and identifying things where we felt like we could make a difference, we actually started using an action plan. So I don't know how many of you have done this. The thing that's really great with action plans is that it is a way to, you don't end up with a pet project. Even though you've got a team and they're working on it, they will go through and identify, okay, well, this is the owner for this particular thing. They'll tell you where you are. We have a lot of stuff that's actually in process. Some of them have been presented out to other, like we have, so like our research zones, which is where we're going to do our prepare to practice series. That presentation was put together and presented at a meeting as a potential project that we would do in the future. So action plans are really nice because it's a great gauge. It also tells you who the owner for that particular thing is, so that if you don't know what the progress is on it, you know exactly who to go to. And then they can also subcategorize things out if they're working with someone within a different department. The other thing that's really great was when we were going through, a lot of the comments, and I'm sure for any of you that have looked at these sort of cross school departments within the last few years, a lot of the comments that come from the students is I'm being nickeled and dimed, law school is so expensive, why can't I have free coffee? You know, all of that, there's sort of that trend. There's that money trend. So one of the things that was a project that we had already started working on, we realized we need to actually do a little PR on this. We need to push this out because we're going to be converting from a fine system within the library to a point system. So it is one place, yes, it's just fines, at the most it's usually $25, but it is a place where we can say, hey, we read through these comments, we listened to you. We are not going to charge you fines to the library. You do need a penalty. So it's professional responsibility for you to make sure that you return your items. So now they're going to get points, they get a certain number of points, they get blocked, you know, it's one of those things. So there is still a penalty, we'll get our resources back, but it's teaching them professional responsibility, and they're no longer thinking the library just wants my money. So this is, sometimes you'll be able to, when you work on a project like this, or you vet and you find out from things that are happening in other, or complaints about other departments, there may be something that you're already doing in your library that you just have to promote more. And then that project will end up, people will be more interested in it because it helps across the whole school and not just your library.
Hello again. I'm going to finish up talking about some additional things we're doing at the Yale Law Library and connecting the dots. And first I'm going to talk about GOOB. GOOB is another thing. It stands for get out of the building, although for us it might be more like get out of the office, get out of your department, get out of wherever you are, the library, to actually talk to people and see how people interact with the library. This is another concept out of the Just Enough Research book, and it actually comes from Steve Blank, who's a business professor at Stanford, who helps Stanford students with startups out of that particular institution. And he requires all of his students who have an idea for a startup to go out and talk to a certain number of people outside of the building before they're even allowed to comment on projects in class. And so at Yale, one of the things that we want to do, and Jordan talked about this a little bit, is look at and observe how people interact with the library. So instead of specific usability tests on the website, for example, what do students do when they go to the shelf and they can't find a book? Who do they talk to? What do they do? What's their reaction? Do they go to the reference desk or the circulation desk? What do they do? What direction do they have to take to get to different parts of the library when they're trying to get something? And this can inform a lot of different decisions, such as where do you put kiosks? Where do you put signage? Where do you put staff? Things like that. Are the areas that people walk through clean and attractive and things like that? So that's something that we look at. Last fall, I was working with some Yale Law Journal editors. They recently changed how they do their source site, and they wanted to try some new tools, and they were having some problems with it. Not technology problems specifically, more like collaboration problems. And I asked them, can I just sit down with you while you do a source site? And I spent the night with them. I looked over students' shoulders. I did answer some questions, but I had a chance to just observe them. And it informed a lot of decisions that we made later. I was able to help with some specific problems, but I also used it to inform our decisions about what types of computers, for example, we should have at our computer kiosks in certain areas of the library. Just as an example. So one of the things that we found is that we've segregated in our usability testing 1Ls and 3Ls. And what we found, 1Ls have really fresh perspectives on the library website, library systems, things like that. 3Ls, faculty, people who've been here a while, they've kind of figured out where they need to go to get what they need. And that is basically called a desire path. I've also heard it called elephant path sometimes too. It's hard to see here, there are footprints in the snow behind this text. Supposedly in Finland, urban planners will go out to parks after a big snowfall to see where people have been walking, and then they'll actually lay built paths into the parks once the snow is cleared. Because the desire paths, where people want to naturally walk into the parks, tell them exactly where they should put the paths. Here's another example from England where engineers built a particular path where people needed to get to that bus stop in the distance. And what we found, is that our students have these exact kind of paths as well. So they have a particular way that they want to get to certain things on the website, and they've learned it just by rote, not necessarily because it makes sense or this or that, but you can use that information to build paths to where they want to go. So we're not doing a lot of lean, agile software development, but we are trying to apply some of those types of principles to the work we do, particularly in a usability context. So if you're not familiar with it, this is another book I'd recommend called Lean UX. If you're not familiar with that type of software development or lean management principles, what we've taken to our usability testing, for example, is rapid iteration and experimentation to try to fix problems, identify problems, and come up with solutions. And usability testing is one way of doing that. Another thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, Google Analytics will actually allow you to run experiments. So you can create an experiment in Google Analytics. Let's say you have a particular page, you want a particular outcome on that page, you want the students to fill out a form, you want them to click particular links, you want them to spend a certain amount of time there. You can direct traffic to multiple pages automatically, set exactly what metrics you want to track for that experiment, and it will actually direct that percentage of traffic to one page or the other automatically for a set amount of time, so you can run an experiment for weeks, months, something like that, and then afterwards it'll give you the data back. So you can literally see, well, this page accomplished exactly what we wanted, whereas these pages weren't as successful. So I'm going to wrap up now. Does anyone know what this is? You can guess. Pardon?
How big is it? What's the scale?
Someone said pager. Oh yeah, it's hard to see, I guess. It's not a pager or a beeper. It kind of looks like one and wears it like one. This is the reason radio is terrible. So this is called a portable people meter. And what this is, Arbitron gives this to people and they wear it like a pager. And radio stations and other media providers send out sub-audible sounds that this picks up and recognizes exactly what radio stations or media providers are around that particular person. So this is why, after this particular device was introduced for ratings gathering, hit songs now, songs in heavy rotation, that used to be played once every 4 hours are now played once every 55 minutes. And the top 40 songs are played double the amount of time that they used to be played. So this has completely revolutionized that particular radio ratings industry. But they still send people diaries. So you would think that, you know, it had so revolutionized the industry that it would make the radio diaries where you say, well, on this day I listened to this station for this amount of time and I really like this station. You would think it would make this useless, but it doesn't. In reality, they complement each other because they all have strengths and weaknesses. So the diary obviously doesn't tell you what you're actually hearing or the sounds around you or even necessarily what you're listening to. If you fill it out later, it may not be particularly accurate. Whereas the portable people meter doesn't necessarily understand context. Maybe you're in someone else's car listening to the radio. You don't really like what they're listening to or something like that. But these tools taken together obviously give people a much more complete picture of who's listening to the radio and what they're listening to and what they want to hear. And similarly, all of these techniques are meant to be complementary and fit into a particular process to help understand our users and accomplish these things that we want to accomplish. So that's it. Does anyone have questions? Yeah.
I got the impression from the three institutions represented here that you were very good at obtaining feedback, mostly from the students, even from fellow librarians, but not so much from faculty members. Do you have any advice for those of us who really need to get feedback from a wide representation of faculty members? If there is any secret pill, any law we can pass, any threats that we can get them to participate?
I do have some ideas. I mean, people can, you know, do you have the most important thing you can do is have a library liaison program.
Yeah.
Is to have, that's what I would say. If there's like one thing you could do, have a library liaison. Build a relationship. Each librarian, or you know, if you're in IT, have someone in your IT department build a relationship with a faculty member. Because you know, I found, you know, especially at Yale, where you know our faculty are kind of, you know, they're unique sometimes in what they're doing. You know, it can take a really long time to get them to open the window into how they work. I've gotten a few of them to open the window, but it takes a really long time, and you have to have a good relationship with them that you build over time. It's not something that you can just, hey, answer the survey, and you're going to get really good information. I don't know if anyone has additional.
At our school, we have one dedicated librarian who is the faculty services coordinator, and she does very much the same thing. She builds personal relationships with the faculty. She goes out of her way to go by their offices, to get coffee where they get coffee, to go to meetings where they are. And so she has spent several years building those relationships, and she goes and she has, whenever we get a new faculty member, she makes sure that she goes in and talks to them when they get there and explains things. We've tried to set up systems like, oh, well, you have to submit your request through the request system, and she's like, just tell me, like, email me, call me, tell me on the way to the bathroom. It doesn't matter. Just let me know what you need, and I will do what I have to do on my end to make sure that we get the statistics and it's in the report. So I think it's a lot more, it's building the personal relationships, it's being where they are, and that's what we found has worked as well.
And you can't be afraid to ask. I mean, I've had, you know, faculty members having a problem. Well, show me what you're doing. Show me how you do this when you normally do this. I mean, that's a good opportunity to say, I mean, that's usability right there. How do you perform this task that you're having trouble with?
One of the other things you can do is just change it. Whatever it is that you're going to change, just change it. And your really vocal faculty, the faculty who liked it the way it is, they'll tell you. We ended up having to create a faculty portal that looked almost exactly like our old website for the vocal faculty that just refused to change their desired paths. So if you want some immediate feedback, just do what you're going to do, and they'll respond. Maybe not kindly, but they will respond and let you know what they want.
And I recommend multiple formats. I've worked at a lot of different institutions. In my last one at Oklahoma City, we had a wide range of faculty. And so have it in print, have it electronic, send it in email, send it in a PDF form. Give it as many ways as you possibly can when you're dealing specifically with like survey data that you really want them to fill out the survey, and then allow them to get it back to you however they want. Don't set any guidelines to it. If they want to drop it by the CERC desk or your office, or hand it to you when you're at one of their presentations, leave it up to them. However you want to get this back to me. But I found that I had the most success that way.
Additional questions?
I'll just offer you an anecdote that goes along with some of the ways other institutions were connecting the dots. About 3.5 years ago, I went to a private seminar, and one of the speakers was the then librarian from the University of Rochester, who Blair Kaufman tells me is now your institution's University Library.
Susan Gibbons, yeah.
She had, and you should talk to her about this if you haven't already, she had an anthropologist on staff who would observe students, who would work with students, and among the things that you did was, you talked about path, desired path, looking literally at where students were before they came into the library to help gauge what they needed once they got there, whether it was research, whether it was water, or a comfortable place to sit. It was just a fascinating study to listen to.
She did do an like almost immediately when she got there. I wasn't there yet, but she did do an ethnographic study of the undergraduate population scale. Actually, they still use that data almost daily. We haven't done anything like that.
And the book I recommended, Just Enough Research, has information about doing ethnographic research. Yeah, when I was, I used to be a firm librarian in Portland, Oregon, and there are a lot of usability companies out in Oregon. And I had friends who were librarians at those companies who would work very closely with the anthropologists to see the type of usability research that they were doing for products and services. Thank you very much. Good, how are you? Okay. Do you want in the big classroom here? Do you want to plug your other?
a survey, it's part of the self-study. So there's the section on feedback, students will answer, we get a survey, so we survey today. And so on the ground, and I think that they would be different, very important. What else would be on LLM and other, some because it's very, yes, very, it was really wonderful because they just started to make it know. And they got to listen to real meetings at the beginning of the semester. Something like that. Because speaking to just the class representatives, because nobody is something. I mean, they're only people who won't say anything, and so the ideas will just too much. And so they're aware that this isn't working, there isn't much that we can do. So yes, keep bringing it up, but there isn't much that we can do. And then there's the that comes occasionally or maybe once or twice and brings some really constructive feedback. Something that I would like to, that I think is real. And the student, they don't know because they're not using story, but you have to click
I have just Well, let's put it down here, and then when I'm ready, I'll pull it up and show it off. I'm not seeing it. Here it is.
Set